Hey everyone, Classic DM, welcome back to this DM's tour of the Hidden Shrine of Tamoachan. If some of you have jumped into this video first, in essence, what we're doing is we're breaking down room by room all the descriptions of the classic original module and talking about how to run it as a DM, the things to look out for, the thing that modern gamers may find to be confusing, what can go well, what can go bad, the interesting mechanics they put in there, all kinds of business. Before I go any further, though, I do want to remember you guys saw my video from years and years and years ago. We took the pre-generated characters that are used in the tournament mode, made these cool character sheets way back in like 2019. If you ever want a copy of the base version of those character sheets, let me know. I can find a place to put them for you. I can make them as a free posting on Patreon. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Or I can add them to my shop at tlcanon.com as a free download. When you're running this, and the way we're talking about it is we're talking about running in a campaign mode, not with these three relatively weak and not very heavily geared, but scrappy pre-generated characters. All right, let's jump back into where we were. Where we were last time, if we covered the entrance area 1, 2, 3, and then we did area 1 in the first video, then we did areas 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now we're going to move down this way into area 8. And I'm not going to recap what happened before. So as we move down to this area here, we get this next part of the dungeon. And as I said in the other videos, John Pintar never made an awesome high resolution map for the Hidden Shrine of Tamoachan, so we don't have that. That's why we're using this really old black and white version of the map. So pardon the lack of high resolution. So in this next room, right, this room 8, here's what the description is. This is another one of those like make you nervous, but it's not really what you think it is. But there's a lot of like red herrings in here, and the Tamoachan does have a lot of this, and it's good and it's bad. It's good because it gets those old school classic players that search every 10-foot square of the map and are very worried about being killed instantly, to pick up on terms and ideas and pictures to figure out how to investigate something. But then there's no reward because nothing actually happens. And in the modern day, especially people playing a lot of video games and stuff, a lot of something clues players into something cool happening. Like you mentioned it and you described it and it sounds neat, but then nothing happens. In the modern world, people kind of give that reward. So this is a psychological element with modern gamers. Like if you're playing with kids and grandkids, or if you're playing with old school guys who've forgotten how to be meticulous like they were when they're 13 years old, it's tricks. You're starting to see some of this happen in this module, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. All right. Area 8, just to remind you one more time, let's just pull that up again. That's this area down here. Everyone's approaching pretty much from this way. As you go down these steps, there's a doorway. The doorways are described throughout the whole module as what they look like. All right. What do we got going on here? This apartment, once again, they use the word apartment all the time in this module. It just means it's a room. Wet, and the walls are covered with a slimy white buildup. Now, if you remember in the previous area, we've got some encounters with lime on the wall. Like it'll burn through your leather armor, burn through your gloves. It's nasty, making you trying to figure out how to push the block out of the way, etc. So once again, we're always mentioning all this water and all this, white lime and junk, and the walls are manky, right? Okay. There's about 1.5 inches of water and mud blanketing the floor. So 1.5 inches of water is not much. You can see right through it, even if it's like full of tannic acid. Within the room are many overturned pedestals and pieces of broken statuary lie on the floor, partially buried in the mud, which is kind of interesting. You ever think of a museum as a picture, like a little Doric column, and it's maybe about waist high, and it's a bust of Julius Caesar or some famous, Roman emperor. That's kind of what you think about when you think of a statuary, overturned pedestals, right? Pieces of broken statuary. So whatever's on the pedestal fell off and broke, right? Partially buried in the mud, but it's only 1.5 inches deep water, but it could be much deeper mud beneath that. That's one thing that's kind of tricky when they do the descriptions. They don't say the room is full of 2 feet of mud with a layer of water on the top. All right, let's keep moving. Only one pedestal in the northwest corner remains standing. Let's just pop that map up and let you know where that is. Remember, north is to the left, so the northwest corner would be over here. So if you had 1, 2, 3, 4, or however many are described, they're not marked on the map. You have to kind of figure that out for yourself as a DM. Where are all these statues? So you're already tipping the players off that one of them's still standing up. Gosh, run over and investigate that. On it sits a small, metallic, 3-sided pyramid. Okay? There's like your 4-sided die in a way, but it's 3-sided. It's not a 4-sided pyramid. It's a 3-sided pyramid, which is a little bit trickier and a little more funny slope to it. Overhead, in the shadow-draped ceiling, are inlaid colored tiles depicting a starry sky and forming strange patterns in the areas above the pedestals, plural. So we have a number of pedestals that are knocked over, sitting in the mud. The statues are broken. One's still standing up, and it's got this 3-sided pyramid, small, not, I mean, is that 10 inches tall or is it 24 inches tall? Is it, you know, what is it? What is it, right? Opposite the entrance of the room is another door. So that's all you really, you give them that initially. The second little paragraph, spaced apart, don't read that right away, right? Because that's going to say, upon approaching the other door, a dark, wet mass clinging to the wall above the door will come into sight. Upon closer inspection, it appears to be green in color. That's also a tricky, like, you might want someone to take a look at it and say, remember, torchlights only 10 feet in radius and kind of like this red orange flickering about to go out with the gas throughout the whole dungeon. And we talked about how to deal with the gas in the very first video in this series. So most players are want to go check out this small pyramid. Now let's just read the DM information, which is the area down here. The small pyramid is made of silver and worth 3 gold pieces. That's not much at all. So I would think something that worth 3 gold pieces made out of silver, maybe it's very rough and unrefined silver, would probably be the size of, you know, maybe like your wallet or a cell phone. I wouldn't think it'd be very big. And it's almost like a woman's earring. Well, why would it be on top of a pedestal? You know, you think of a pedestal holding a large statue, right? It represents the god of the moon and lightning, not lighting. And another unpronounceable, Apopakatakiel or something like that, right? The other fallen statuary was made of stucco and depicted other Olman gods. These include a coyote, 1, a crab-headed, an alligator-headed god, that's 2 and 3, a feathered warrior, 4, and a jaguar, 5. Beyond this small pyramid, which would be the 6th one. So you need to kind of figure out where these little 6 statues would be. Maybe 3 along the east-west axis and across the room, 3 across the east-west axis as well. Don't make the mistake of assuming that because there's 4 equal, you know, symmetrical niches, that there's 1 statue in each niche. And you can't put 2 in each niche because then you'd have 8, right? It's not that big of a deal, but when you're DMing an adventure and you realize there's like a goofy math error or something like that, you can sometimes say to yourself, what was the problem here? Did I mess this up? And then the players kind of lose confidence in you. You don't remember, you're running someone else's dungeon and you said the wrong thing. I do that all the time myself, right? So anyway, fire, there's the mass over the doorway is a large colony of algae, though it closely resembles green slime. This would be a moment where you want to have your monster manual set aside and you can read some descriptions of what green slime looks like. It's a false alarm, right? It's not green slime, right? Fire will have little effect on it because the algae is oozing wet and fire does not burn with much effect in the presence of the poisonous gas filling the level. Good thing they put that in there to remind you what's going on. Attempts to dislodge this pseudo-green slime will result in its dropping slippery sections on the players. The walls of the room are heavily coated with lime, and once again, the lime problem, and cause 1 point of damage for each round skin touches it. So, what's the deal with this? You know, I can't resist allowing the players the opportunity to investigate these statues. And there's something about the small silver pyramid that rings goofy to me. Like if I think of, you know, these Olman gods, right? An alligator-headed Olman god, a feathered warrior, and a jaguar. I almost imagine in my mind immediately these carvings of something about the size of a bowling ball, right? And sitting on top of these pedestals, they've fallen over and they're made of stucco. Maybe the paint's worn off. They're sitting in the water. They're all messed up. Look, the room got trashed. What's on the walls? The walls are just wet and covered with slimy buildup. It's a real creepy algae, like it flooded. Probably stinks in there. But the small silver pyramid just seems so out of place. You've got these other statues, probably the size of bowling balls, as I mentioned, as we're making an assumption here. We're not going to have little statues that are 4 inches tall. And then we all have this cheapo 3 gold piece silver pyramid. And what's its purpose? The other ones are figures, humanoid, people, animal, and the other one's a geometric shape that's odd. So this may be a good opportunity for you to change the silver pyramid shape into something else. Maybe it's another, like maybe just take one of the other descriptions of there's a coyote, crab-headed, alligator-headed gods. Those are like half man, half beast. Feathered warrior and a jaguar, right? The god of the moon and lightning, you could make it where a situation like which one of those gods would be most interesting for the moon and lightning. And none of them, players, are you never going to tell them this, right? You're never going to say, oh, you've discovered that this is the god of the moon and lightning. So it's up to you what you want to do. The room's a kind of a dead end, and there's not that much going on with it beyond this. So I would personally think it would be fun to do something interesting in the room to give it some kind of a lore or connectivity to something happening in the ceiling, where the symbolism, if you take all the statues and stand them back up and put them in the right order the way they were, maybe something happens in the sky pattern, shifts and change, which gives you information that you could use later for a puzzle later in the dungeon. Or you could just do it, rules as written, leave it here, and this is just another be on your toes, no it's not green slime, the place is trash. All right, let's move on to the next area, which is a longer hallway, area 9. So we come through this area, and the players are going to come through here. We have this rivulet of water streaming down the passageway to pair of double doors and this large statue here. Let's read verbatim what that actual description is to you. And I've got the picture queued up in the background. So we're going to go to this one. This next area is called the stone statue. Let's highlight this for you. All right, here we go. This hallway seems to be coated with the same slime found elsewhere, and the floor of the passage is covered with a layer of mud. Through this muck, a steady stream of water trickles north. The stucco on the walls is slacking off, and there are silver slime tracks crisscrossing the walls and ceiling. Ahead in the darkness, they glow faintly. That's pretty creepy, right? What's causing slime tracks? Now, if you've read the module, you played before, you know the Lord of Snails is coming up in the next room, which is another crazy, creepy animal kingdom that can talk, kind of an encounter, but it's also quite nasty. But some people, they start to get nervous when you start having this kind of slime trail thing happening. All right, so along the east wall of the passage stands a 12-foot tall statue of the man of, let me start over, hang on. Along the east wall of the passage stands a 12-foot tall stone statue of a man outfitted in native finery and holding a narrow stone tray in his raised arms. His eyes appear to be black gemstones. The right one droops out of its socket, balancing on the sweating cheek. Behind the left shoulder can be seen the hilt of a weapon, most likely a sword. The nose, forehead, and tray of the statue are chipped and scratched. So, show the player's illustration too. We got that up here. I pulled all the pictures out and made them individual so you don't have to fold the module in half. So you're seeing this. Here's the wall. Here's this cool statue. It's 12 feet tall. A 6-foot tall man would be about the halfway point, maybe about right here. So here's about how tall someone is next to this statue. You have to jump and peek up to take a look at this tray. It talks about the glinting, thing in its eye. It's got the sword on its back. This looks like an amulet that you could do something with, but that's not described. So you are going to find that like players are hyper-focused on this. Players might hyper-focus on whether this is removable. Players don't usually freak out about that. When you say the word sword in the description, then sometimes people are very interested in it. You have to also remember, has anyone played the adventure before? If they haven't played it before, you're going to have a good time with this one, right? All right, so the eyes of the statue are polished obsidian, worth 2 gold pieces each. The sword is made of laminated wood, inset with jagged teeth of obsidian. +1, +4 versus gas spores. That's really weird. Intelligence 3. Intelligence 3. Yes, that's inside the parentheses. In D&D, AD&D, you may or may not remember, some magical swords have an ego and have an intellect level. This is a stupid sword. It's kind of weird because it's not really described in great detail. And in the Dungeon Master's Guide, they sometimes talk about this kind of stuff. Whether you want to have that in there or not is up to you. It's made out of laminated wood, right? And instead of with jagged teeth of obsidian, so it would saw things. It being a +4 versus gas spores is kind of weird. It would just go through the air. I always thought that was kind of weird. I think it was more interesting to have it be a valuable, ornamental, laminated wood sword with these obsidian inlays in it and maybe jade and be something of value, right? The sword will come free easily if any character pulls it up and out. However, to reach the sword or the eye gems, a character will have to climb up the statue and stand on the tray. If more than 1,000 gold pieces of weight of pressure applied to the tray, so that's that ratio of 100 pounds is not 100 gold pieces, it's 10 times that amount, it's 1,000 gold pieces. Of weight of pressure applied to the tray, most people weigh over 100 pounds. I mean, maybe, it depends how much the halfling eats. A gnome will probably weigh less than 100 pounds. The statue will overbalance and topple into the hall, causing 2 to 12 points of damage to those caught underneath it. Once the statue has fallen, it will reveal a narrow passageway hidden behind it, 4 feet above the floor. All right, let's look back at the picture again so you can talk about this very briefly. So remember we said a person's about 6 feet tall is about here. So this far off the floor, there's a narrow passageway behind here. So which say there's a passageway concealed by the statue behind it like this that you'd probably be able to see. Players might also want to just push the statue over and see if it rocks back and forth and knock it over. There's all kinds of things players do here. It's a fun little puzzle. Find the passage behind the waterfall. Behind the thing is always fun to do. There's not much more really to that that's too exciting, but it does lead to a secret passage. So remember, this statue is here. I'm going to zoom this a little bit in here. This is the room with the statues and the pedestals and the starry sky on the ceiling. This is the slime trail. This is the water flow. And there's slime trails from the Lord of Snails from Area 11 in here. And this is this narrow little secret passageway. So this is a branching path finally. So someone can find this secret passage, or they may not, and end up going into the dungeon into this way. And they may even skip this entire encounter and move on that way and forget to come back, which happens all the time in the Temple of Elemental Evil, because there's so many wings and so many doors and so many choices to go left or go right. They forget sometimes to come back and look at the door behind the door they were at before. One of the ways I found that works really well is to make sure that when you have doors, that you describe the door with something thematic and interesting on it. Instead of saying it's a blank stone door, like it has murals painted on it, it has carvings or gemstones. Every one of the doors in a temple like this could have a tricky mechanism for opening it. Those are things you may want to consider to lure people to kind of come into this area or come in this area from either side first. You may find a situation where you don't want them. You want them to come in here first, no matter what. And you may want to have this blocked off where they can't resolve the problem. But the little passageway is pretty narrow. So this is this area right here. Okay, we're just going to highlight the whole thing. Water beads collect upon the walls of this narrow passage, and the flooring is cold and damp. A low ceiling, only 5 feet tall, further cramps this avenue and limits activity. The northern entrance to this passage is concealed as a block of stone mounted on a central pivot. The secret door has been wedged open by accumulated debris. The western entrance, hidden by the statue, will appear to be blank wall from within the passage. The portal may only be opened from the inside by releasing a concealed catch at the intersection of the wall and the ceiling. All right? So that's pretty interesting. But it's a typical secret passage. It's not that tricky. Okay, room 11. We're 16 minutes in here. 11 is a complicated space. I'll try to burn through this quickly without not doing it justice. But I want to show you the layout first. There's some nasty stuff in this area. The rat's nest stuff in 11A in this area here is very, very, very nasty. There is an intelligent snail in this area, which is very nasty. And there's water that's very, very deep around the perimeter. This whole room is filled with water, has these pillars, and then stairs that go up. I believe this is going up. Yes, this is stairs that go up. So this is stairs going down and stairs going up. So this is a pool. Like imagine this is like what, a 50 or 60 foot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 foot, 70 foot long by 50 foot wide, massive like Olympic swimming pool, right? It's full of water. Let's read the description, because this is a very nasty, tricky room. It could be a really cool combat encounter too. All right, let's pull this over here. The doors to this room are made of bronze and are tinted blue with oxidation, so as if they're copper. Well, I guess bronze would turn blue. A short hall ending in steps down leads to the central chamber. This chamber is flooded with a brackish water, meaning kind of like black. The pool seems to be about 2 feet deep and covers the entire floor. A central hall flanked by narrow aisles is formed by 2 rows of massive square columns. Those should be all decorated and detailed. That's one thing I did in Chisra and my maps and Unreal. I made sure all the columns were really detailed and stuff, had crazy designs on them. The walls are coated with slime, and there are vile glowing lines etched across them. From what can be seen of the chamber's walls, the stone appears to be crudely worked. It always appears to be. Is it or isn't? 2 corroded bronze braziers stand thigh deep in the brackish water. Towards the middle of the room, 2 broken urns, apparently one about 4 feet tall, huddle in the water. In the darkness on the eastern wall appears to be a growth of some sort, which gleams as vilely as the slime trails, burning with a greenish hue. So let's make sure we understand what we're talking about here. So this green hue nastiness is along this wall here. This is the east wall. North, south, west, and east. So now get your bearing on this, because we're going to talk about the water in the DM section here. Okay? The water covering the floor is 2 feet deep in most places, but the side aisles and the northernmost 10-foot section of floor form a moat. It's 12 feet deep on 3 sides. Characters not probing ahead will be unable to detect its presence until it's too late. Anyone who slips into mud has a chance of drowning. The drowning rules are really tricky. This module has a lot of like, you might drown, this might happen to you, here roll a D6, etc. They have these made up, there's no, like I said, I always like to make fun of it, no athletics checks, right? There's all kinds of ways for you to what they're basically saying is this is 12 foot deep, really deep water. This is steps going out, steps going down, 2 feet deep here in the middle. These 2 niches here are described shortly thereafter. So remember that. So if someone's walking into the chamber or to investigate this slimy, goofy thing up here, we haven't talked about this yet, or look at the pedestal in the middle, they're walking in 2 feet deep water, which is going to come up to over your kneecaps. unless you're a gnome or a halfling or something. All right, let's get to the next part. This is where it gets tricky. Okay. Here we go. The drowning rules. This is very, very tricky. The base chance of a character drowning is 5%. So if you can swim, unless you're wearing heavy plate mail or overloaded with gear, why would you have a 5% chance of drowning? Because you go, oh, I fell in the water. Have you ever fallen in the water? I've fallen in the water before, even as a kid and as an adult. But you're taking a step and you go, wham, you have this millisecond where you can like hold your breath and you're in the water and you know how to tread water, you just swim. So it's not that big of a deal. But it's almost like if someone is wearing heavy armor, right, then you maybe have this problem. This chance is decreased if the character's dexterity is 15 or greater by minus 5%. So if you had 15 dexterity, you have a 0% chance to drown. For every point the character is injured, and for every 5 pounds, which is 50 gold pieces, of weight carried by the character, increase it by 1%. The armor worn by the character may also increase the character's chance of drowning, plus 10% for ring, splint, or chainmail, plus 20% for plate mail. If the percentile roll is equal to or less than the adjusted chance for drowning, the character will sink below the surface and take 1 to 6 points of damage per round while they're submerged, minus the constitution bonus of the character for the first 3 rounds submerged. In order to reach the surface, the character may lighten his or load and take the stuff off, take your armor off, roll greater than his or her new chance of drowning. The walls are heavily coated with lime. This makes the water brackish. Any character who stands this water for more than 3 turns, which is 30 minutes in AD&D, will have their soaked portions of his or her clothing begin to rot away after 30 minutes. The bottom is slippery, and characters must check for slipping on a roll of 4 or less on a 2d6. So you got to roll 2d6, which is 2 to 12, 4 or less, and you are going to slip. Plus 1 to the roll of dexterity, 15 or higher. Movement speed's half while in the water. So all that is... You're a DM, you know how to handle it, right? I don't need to talk about it too much. It's pretty brutal. 5% chance to drown sounds pretty ridiculous. It's more of a situation where someone's fallen in the water and they sank to the bottom. The bottom's very slippery. Is anything in the water? Most people are freaked out when the water. Can someone throw a rope and help the person climb out? Yeah, this is just one of those, like, remember who's wearing heavy armor? Are they going to sink to the bottom, right? If you were wearing chainmail, you would not be able to tread water. Okay, that's the way I look at it. If you're wearing, depending upon the water you're wearing, any of the metal armors, the leather armors and stuff are not that big of a deal. Remember Maximus's boiled leather armor when he's talking to the little kid in the Gladiator movie? That's like leather armor, okay? The phosphorescent glow on the eastern wall is actually unpronounceable. The Lord of Snails, a giant slug, which usually means a slug without a shell, okay? And can cling to walls of the ceiling. AC 8, which is pretty high. Hit dice 6, which is good. Hit points 29, which is low. 3 attacks, 1 to 8 for the bite. 2 to 5, 2 to 5 for slashing tentacles. They act rather as long whips. The slug may only bite at targets directly in front of it. Attacks on the slug are from -2 from damage roll due to its rubbery skin. That's pretty interesting. When the creature is reduced to half its hit points, it'll begin to take normal damage. It also spits a slimy and irritating acid up to 60 feet, which causes 1 to 4 points of damage each round it touches flesh. The acid will also cause swelling and a loss of feeling to all exposed flesh. In 3 rounds, making arms and legs stiffer and causing -1 to hit and making AC worse by 1 place. So if you're AC 6, you're now going to be AC 7, right? That's what they mean there. Because remember, the armor class in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is like 10 is no armor, 2 is plate mail and shield, etc. Demigorgon's like -8, those kinds of numbers. The swelling will last for 3 to 6 turns, right? 3 turns is 30 minutes, okay? 6 turns would be 2 hours, I believe, right? 30 minutes, so 6 turns is 1 hour. So 30 minutes to an hour. The acid can easily be washed off. Finally, the slug will crush anything that falls beneath its muscular foot for 2 to 8 points of damage per round. All right, here's where it gets tricky. Once again, previously we had a little crayfish with like a quarter of a hit point. Then we had this, hermit crab. And now we've got this slug. And unpronounceable is a highly intelligent and quite the boaster. In ancient lore, it is considered to be related to the moon. A fact which is unique is quite proud. During combat, the slug will detail in Ullman what it has in store for the party and how hopeless their situation is. This is very tricky. When I made the pre-generated characters, which I've closed that down now in the background, I made sure that the characters knew Ullman, that one of the characters knew Ullman, like the barbarian, as opposed to having him come from like the tiger nomads or something like that. It's up to you. The Ullman thing is tricky in this adventure where this slug is talking, saying this stuff to you, and the hermit crab is saying stuff to you. And read languages is reading languages, not understanding language. Comprehend languages would be something very important for players to utilize here. And this Bond villain boasting and bragging is funny and gives it personality, but in some ways it seems almost ridiculous. But I don't want to be negative about it. But it's up to you to how you want to figure that kind of stuff. Right. So after it's been, boasting about how hopeless their situation is, if it begins to lose the combat, is reduced to a quarter hit points, down to a quarter, not a quarter off the top, the lug will either surrender and after bargaining agree to lead the party, or else it will flee and conceal itself in the moat. If the party agrees to be led, the slug will lead them to the moat and will stretch its body across, making it appear to be solid ground. Those following the slug without taking precautions will plunge into the moat and be stunned for 1 round, after which they must swim, see the drowning rules. The slug will lead the party to the tomb of Hurakan and instruct them to open the door. Once the door is open, he'll flee from the party and hide in the bottom of the moat. The slug is sensitive to fire and will take +2 points of damage from such attacks, like magical fire attacks. It also dislikes salt in its skin, which would never happen, taking 1 to 4 points of damage per round while attempt to wash it off. Okay, we've got to do the alcoves next before we finish the slug encounter, right? You're already probably thinking, if you listen to me read that, about how this could be very tricky. You may want to have a situation where this nasty slug just tries to kill people and eat them. I mean, it's been down here, God knows what it's been eating the whole time, as opposed to doing this communication type thing. Another trick you could do, and put a comment if you have a suggestion as well here. I mean, would you want to do telepathy? Does it speak in ESP? Does it only speak to one person? Is it always, if it's a cleric in a party, to another god? Is that what's offensive to the slug? The slug thinks it's a god. There's all kinds of interesting psychological personality elements you could add to it. But as a DM, you don't need to put on your slug voice to make this entertaining. You could just use some of the basic words and keep it calm. All right, the alcoves. The alcoves are very, very, very nasty, and you have to be very careful with this one, okay? Just inside the southern doorway to the left and right, which is the east and west, are 2 small alcoves. These small anterooms contain old fountains, cracked and crusted with white chalky substance. The fountain on the east is drained and empty. There appears to be an amount of rubbish littering the floor. The fountain on the west still holds some green, scummy water in which something moves. That's cool. That's a great description. Just enough for you to figure out, like, should I go check out this one or check out this one? So that's one thing that's really exciting about D&D, is what to do now. The description here doesn't say that appears to be. It's not too tricky. It's just very, by the book. Both of the fountains are caked with lime. Remember all the lime rules from area like 4, 5, and 6. And the one to the east has a small amount of concentrated lime solution at the bottom. 2 points of damage for around contact with the skin to wipe it off. It looks like cloudy water. The same fountain has a small amulet lying beneath the caked lime on the bottom. The amulet is made of brass and chrysoprase, which I believe is a form of precious gem. I'm not sure. I've never seen that word before in my life. I remember when I first read this when I was in middle school, I was like, what's that mean? It must be like an amethyst or something. And belong to the Lord of Snails. It's possible to use the amulet as a bargaining point with the giant slug, which you'll all be too happy to accept in return for free passage to the tomb. That, I've never, ever had players put 2 and 2 together like that. Never. They've never found the amulet and had the talking snail come at them and warn them of their imminent doom and have some, hey, grab that $30 necklace you had, hold it up and say, if you don't stop bothering us, we'll give you back your necklace. It just never happens. I always thought it was interesting that they had these elements in a lot of the old D&D modules, and I almost wonder, like, did they play test it? Did people ever try that? I think the old school people that designed the modules, and when they wrote these things and played them locally, they were so used to being so methodical all the time. They weren't so, combat centric like I am. They weren't so interested in going after the loot and defeating the enemies. They would try all kinds of adventurous ways to see if they can solve problems by parlaying, right? And some people, I've seen people on Facebook say, oh, I really enjoy we parlay with the giants and convince them the stone giants are doing this in the, in the setting of the hill giant chief to cause a massive riot, right? So those are all viable things that could possibly happen, right? All right, so here's where it gets nasty. In the southeast corner of the eastern foyer, a litter of rats are nesting in the rubble. The rats, AC 7, hit dice 1/4, hit points 1, number attacks 1, damage 1, are plague-ridden. Save versus poison or become infected from their bite. So if a successful hit hits you, right, I would say open flesh. If the infected character is not cured by the start of the 4th turn, the wound will begin to swell and become pus-filled, and the character will become delirious. 1 turn later, the character will die. This is like the fast-paced leprosy, pus, disease, plague ever created. I mean, it's worse than COVID. If you, and what I would do with this, to tell you the truth, because you don't want anyone to get bit by a rat, and you roll a natural 20 and you're getting bit. 5% chance to be bit by a little rat. Maybe there's a litter. Well, let's just say there's 12 little rats, right? And you can't bump a fireball on the alcove where I'm standing around going, oh crap. Someone else could be in the other fountain dinking around with the other, like, the other old fountain, while this could be very nasty. So the whole like accelerated plague ridden die in 50 minutes thing is pretty nasty. It almost reminds me of the endless sleep thing in the other room, right? Okay. The rats are hidden in their lair. The anteroom to the west is empty, but the fountain is filled with algae, and some bullfrogs are raising a brood of tadpoles in the water. Water beetles supply them with food. So you may want to think about this. You may want to have a situation where, if you get bit by the rat, that someone becomes sick, and you give them plenty of information that they're very, very ill and they need to get a cure disease going, right? Or they're going to become very sick and feverish and start losing X number of hit points. I just wouldn't have them drop dead in 50 minutes, okay? So I'm going to stop there for today. It's like 30 minutes, each one of these little episodes. But this is a really cool adventure. There's a lot of really neat things to think about. This area here, 8, you could add some more stuff here to make it more mystical. I mean, think of Mist and Riven, right? Think of the Mist and Riven types of puzzles from the 90s you could put in Area 8 using the Amaya lore or the Olmec lore. This Area 9 with the statue is kind of neat. How come there's not like 4 statues in the hallway? Wouldn't it be interesting to have like one statue here, one statue here, one here, one here, maybe one in the hallway? And wouldn't that be really neat? It would look like a symmetrical layout of statues going down the hallway. And that when one of them has a secret passage behind it, that would make Area 9 have more value to me. In this room here, 11A, the rat's nest, we just talked about that. Think about how you want to handle that. This area here with the Lord of Snails, the slug. Remember, it's not a snail, it's a slug, which means it doesn't have a shell or a house on its back. He's over here in this wall. Do you really want to get in a situation where you've had, a crayfish from under the sea waving his things at you, and he has 1/4 of a hit point with his hermit crab buddy, and it's okay. The saltwater theming of the creatures living in the tomb there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that some of the dialogue-y things are a little goofy, but that's up to you and your table and your game. I mean, you may be playing this game with your 5-year-old, your 10-year-old son, and your 13-year-old daughter, and your wife, and your one of your buddies from down the street who brings the beer, and you may find that like the little kids love it when the animals talk, right? Because it's all about the players. And everything you should do, you need to tailor things to your players. It should be fun. And so take this existing module, and when you have these situations, if you agree, and you think these things could be a little cooler, a little neater, add a little touches here and there. Make it feel more crazy, cultural, and exciting. It's a great adventure. We're going to move on to Area 12A and 12B in the next episode. Thanks for listening in. Be sure to share any comments down below. I'd love reading people's stories. Like when we ran it, this happened. Because the design of these videos is for DMs to get that gritty conversation. You're getting some of my opinions on things. What's your opinion? Because I like to engage with people on the YouTube channel. I think it's fun to hear other people's neat ideas, especially when there's something that like I got completely wrong. Fix it. All right, cool. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode. Take care.